So we are reading Zero Limits by Joe Vitale and Dr. Hugh Lin. We are on chapter 14, page number 77 of the book and page number, 177 of the book and 177 of the PDF.
The truth behind the story. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
So now this is a, oops. So this is a very, very powerful statement, right? It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. So anything that we are experiencing in our life, many times we think that it is not our fault. It is being created by someone else. But if it is happening in our life, then we automatically become responsible. So the blame game, right? That this happened because of that, or giving, what do you call that? Justification. Whenever we are justifying ourselves, we are going on the left side of the grid. Whenever we are blaming someone, we are going on to the left side of the grid. Only when we take responsibility are we on the right side of the grid. So if anything is happening in our life, we need to introspect and look into ourselves as to how that has come into our life. What does it need to teach us? How does it help us to grow? The moment we start looking at it from that perspective, then that thing which has come into our life, which we at times can feel is depleting, can become a very, very uplifting and a very, very powerful thing that is happening in our life. But the trick over here is to take responsibility.
I wasn't done with Dr. Hewlin. I still didn't have the complete story on his work at that mental hospital. You never saw patients? I asked him again one day. Never? I saw them in the hallway, but never as a patient in my office, he said. One time I saw one of them and he said, I could kill you, you know. I replied, I bet you could do a good job too.
So when he made that statement, right, he could have got scared. He could have got annoyed, which would have put him on the left side of the grid. But he operated from the right side of the grid. I'm not saying that I'm going to be able to do this, but the fact is that awareness, right? To say that, if you did it, you would do a good job. So he is giving a compliment to the fellow in front of him. And naturally, that fellow, where does it leave that fellow? He gets disarmed that this guy is giving me a compliment. So now what do I do? How can I kill him? That kind of situation over here.
Dr. Hewlin went on to say, when I started at the state hospital working with the criminally mentally ill, we had 3 or 4 major attacks between patients every day. There were maybe 30 patients at that time. People were shackled, put in seclusion, or restricted to the ward. Doctors and nurses walked through the halls with their backs against the wall, afraid of being attacked. After just a few months of cleaning, we saw a complete change for the better. No more shackles, no more seclusion, and people were allowed to leave and to do things like work and play sports.
So now this is so pathetic kind of a situation, right? That people had to walk with their backs to the wall and totally in fear. So totally operating out of the left side of the grid. And that perpetuated the problem. So naturally, there were a lot of attrition. People cannot sustain being on the left side all the time. It's not a good feeling. So in this hospital, there was a lot of turnover of staff, right? Because people could not handle it. So, but after the clearing started taking place, I guess he'll say it again in the going forward. But the attrition rate in the staff also stopped once Dr. Hewlin started to clean. And of course, the inmates started to clear up. They were allowed to move out. They started playing games, etc., etc. So things started really becoming normal.
But what did he do exactly to begin the transformation? I had to take complete responsibility within myself for actualizing the problems outside myself, he said. I had to clean my own toxic thoughts and replace them with love. There wasn't anything wrong with the patients. The errors were in me. As Dr. Hewlin explained it, the patients and even the ward didn't feel love, so he loved everything. I looked at the walls and saw they needed to be painted, he told me, but none of the new paint would stick. It would peel off right away. So I simply told the walls that I loved them. Then one day, someone decided to paint the walls, and this time the paint stuck.
So now this is beautiful, right? So what does he say over here? That the problem, if I am experiencing the problem, that means the problem is in me. It is not outside. So he starts to clear himself, right? And then the next step he takes is he starts to say, I love you to everything. And this is something, let me tell you, I have found when we go for energy rectification to people's houses, we have all these show pieces, etc., lined up in our places. Now the show pieces are inside the cabinets for years and no one has touched them. Let me tell you, I've experienced this really myself, where even these inanimate objects want to be touched, they want to be caressed, they want to be loved, right? The moment you start doing that, they start radiating a very powerful field around them and they can act as energizers of your house. But if you leave them like that, they start acting as depleters. So it's very important. Ye jo apna in our culture, this Diwali cleaning business was a very important part. Why? Because in that time you removed all the furniture, you shifted everything, you touched everything, you cleaned everything, and then you put it back. Now, if something has depleting energy, then even if you do something to it, it will not work. So in this case, the walls were not holding the paint. Okay. Now, one thing again I've seen when I go for Vastu rectification to people's houses, wherever there is damp coming, unless like there's an AC or something like that, if damp is appearing on its own, that can also indicate that there is some kind of a depleted energetic force over there. So the moment you clear it, you clean it, you put something that is energizing to it, you will find that the damp, etc., will stop coming. So raise the energy level of that space and automatically things clear up. This I'm finding even more profoundly in the biogeometry method, where they say that everything can be centered. So by rotating things, you can center them where they connect. The external connects with the center and BG3 energies start to get generated. So they start generating stuff for you. So there are many ways of actually rectifying and creating this powerful field, which is that sacred energy, which is available to us when we go to sacred places. We can start, having many generators of this within our environment. And as we do that, things will start operating properly. So over here, what he says is that even if you painted it, the paint would peel off because the holding capacity was not there. But the moment he started clearing and saying, I love you, I care for you, the wall started feeling wanted and the paint started to hold. And this is something which really happens, right? We have to pay attention to this.
Niket, I have a question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
In hospitals, there's so many kind of emotions which one experiences. So the walls must be also absorbing a lot of the pain and the trauma which goes around. So what
101.
about those places? I mean,
101%. So that's why in the olden times, we were told that when you visit a hospital or a cemetery, you need to come back and have a bath. You need to change your clothes because there will be impregnation. It is called impregnation, right? When you go somewhere, everything gets impregnated. This is also the reason why we were told that don't wear rings, etc., when you go to a crematorium. because the energies there will get absorbed by the rings, because the crystalline structure of the rings or the stones that can really absorb the energies. So this was the reason why we were told. So that's why that constant clearing needs to be done, right? You need to energize your room. You need to energize the place you are in. And if the energy of the place where you are sleeping, where you are attempting to recover is low, then recovery will automatically get restricted. So personally speaking, if anyone of mine very close to me and I'm allowed, if I'm allowed to do it, I will always rectify the room immediately as soon as someone goes there. So I'll be putting few stickers here and there to energize the room so that recovery can improve. Okay. And then now if you come into your house and the room's energy is low, then again recovery will become a difficult task. So there are so many methods, and all this we talk about in the Vastu and Energy Field program, where you can actually learn how to do it yourself. It's not something that is hoo-ah, right? You can actually sensitize yourself and do it for yourself.
That sounded weird, to say the least, but I was getting accustomed to this sort of talk from him. I finally had to ask the question that had been bothering me the most. Did all of the patients get released? Two of them never were, he said. They were both transferred elsewhere. Otherwise, the entire ward was healed. Then he added something that truly helped me understand the power of what he had been doing. If you want to know what it was like during those years, write Omaka Okala Hamuguchi. She worked as the social worker during the time I was there. I did. She wrote the following to me. Dear Joe, thank you for this opportunity. Please know that I am writing this in collaboration with Emery Lance Oliveira, who is a social worker who worked on the unit with Dr. Hewlin. I found myself the social worker assigned to the newly opened forensic unit at the State Mental Hospital in Hawaii. This unit was called the Closed Intensive Security Unit. It housed prisoner patients who had committed often heinous felony crimes of murder, rape, assault, robbery, molestation, and combinations thereof, and were also diagnosed with or thought to possibly have a serious mental disorder. Some of the prisoner patients had been found not guilty by reason of insanity and sentenced to be here. They were floridly psychotic and required treatment, and some were there for examination and assessment to determine their fitness to proceed, that is, their ability to understand the charges against them and participate in their own defense. Some were schizophrenic, some bipolar, and some mentally retarded, while others were diagnosed psychopaths or sociopaths. There were also those who were trying to convince the courts they were one or all of the above.
So you can understand, the nature of the people in that ward. They were all, if you look at it from our perspective, they were all conky or crazy.
All were locked in the unit 24/7 and allowed to leave escorted in wrist and ankle restraints only for medical or court appointments. Most of their day was spent in a seclusion room, a locked room with concrete walls and ceilings, a locked bathroom, and no windows. Many were highly medicated. Activities were few and far between. Incidents were expected occurrences: patients attacking staff, patients attacking other patients, patients attacking themselves, patients attempting escapes. Staffing incidents were also a problem. Staff manipulating patients, drugs, sick leave, and workers' compensation problems. Staff discord, perpetual turnover in psychologist, psychiatrist, and administrator positions, plumbing and electrical problems, and so on and so on. It was an intense, volatile, depressing, and wild place to be. Even the plants would not grow.
Okay. So what was it, right? Constant incidents between people, disharmony between people, electrical equipment not working properly, constant electrical faults, okay? Even plants not growing. This typically shows depleted energy. There is a sinkingness, there's a downward trend of the energy. So it sucks everything out. All the energy, all the life force starts getting sucked out by that space. So you have many such spaces where if you go there, you'll feel as if you're totally drained of energy, right? So this was a place like that. And then you need to clear it. You need to clean it. Of course, he is using Ho'oponopono to clear the space. There are other means that we actually teach you at the energy field program.
And even when it was relocated to a newly renovated, much more secure unit with a fenced recreation area, no one expected anything to really change.
So why didn't anyone expect anything to change? If you follow the same process, you cannot expect a different result.
And even when when another of those psychologists showed up, it was assumed he would try to stir things up, attempt to implement state of the art programs, then leave almost as soon as he came. Ho hum. However, this time it was a Dr. Hewlin who, besides being friendly enough, appeared to do next to nothing. He didn't do evaluations, assessments, or diagnosis. He provided no therapy and did not perform any psychological testing. He often came late and did not attend case conferences or participate in mandated record keeping. He instead practiced a weird process of self-identity, Ho'oponopono, which had something to do with taking 100% responsibility for yourself, looking only at yourself and allowing the removal of negative and unwanted energies within you. Ho hum.
So removal of anything that showed up in your field, which was depleting. Okay, I don't like using the words negative or unwanted. So anything that was creating a disturbance in your field, really disturbing your equanimity, you want to clear it.
Weirdest of all was the observation that this psychologist seemed always at ease and even to be really enjoying himself. He laughed a lot, had fun with patients and staff, and seemed to genuinely enjoy what he was doing. Everyone seemed to love and enjoy him in return, even if it didn't appear he did much work.
So what was Dr. Hewlin doing? Constantly on the right side of the grid, right? Constantly radiating that love, constantly radiating that compassion, constantly being in that state of equanimity himself. So whoever he interacted with automatically came into that state of consciousness.
And things began to shift. Seclusion rooms began clearing. Patients were becoming responsible for their own needs and business. They also began participating in planning and implementing programs and projects for themselves. Medication levels were also dropping, and patients were being allowed to leave the unit sans restraint. The unit became alive, calmer, lighter, safer, cleaner, more active, fun, and productive. The plants began to grow. Plumbing problems became almost non existent. Incidents of violence on the unit became rare, and staff seemed more harmonious, relaxed, and enthusiastic. Rather than sick leave problems and understaffing, overstaffing and losing positions now became a concern.
So a total about turn, right? So he cleared the space, he cleared himself rather, and the space automatically cleared and things started to move correctly.
Two specific situations made an especially memorable impact on me. There was a severely delusional, paranoid patient with a history of violence who had seriously hurt several people in the hospital and out in public, and who had had multiple hospital admissions. He was sent to CISU this time for committing a murder. He was creepily frightening to me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up whenever he was anywhere close.
So the body reacts to the field of that person, right? So there's a charge in that person and a hair stands up. This is something which can happen. That electricity, like that electrical field at times comes, and then the hair can stand up. For me, the hair standing up means many times an entity is near me, or I'm saying something which is the absolute truth, or some kind of a great energy shift is going to take place. That is the time that my hair starts to stand up on my face, on my hands, etc.
It was then, much to my surprise, that a year or two after Dr. Hewlin showed up, I spotted him walking in my direction, escorted sans restraints, and the hairs on the back of my neck did not stand up. It felt as if I was just noticing, without judgment, even when we passed each other almost shoulder to shoulder. There was not my usual getting ready to run reaction. In fact, I noticed he looked calm. I was no longer working on the unit at that time, but had to find out what had happened. I learned he had been out of seclusion and restraints for some time, and the only explanation was that some of the staff were doing the Ho'oponopono Dr. Hewlin had shared with them.
So now that charge which was there got discharged from that person. So now her hair did not stand out. Okay. So this is very much like that static electricity. When you touch something, there's a spark which comes out. I'll share an incident. We had gone, I think it was 1983, we had gone to Las Vegas and we were staying at the Hilton at that time. I think it was one of the biggest hotels at that time. And let me tell you, if you touch the doorknob, there was a spark, push, and you could actually see the flames. So we used to have to open the doorknobs using that thing that they give, that sock they give to clean your shoes. We used to wear that in a hand and then open the door, right? So this static which he's talking about is something like that. That charge builds up in a space and then it starts to discharge when it comes into contact with something. So naturally, when that charge was dissipated, her hair no longer stood up, sorry.
The other situation occurred while I was watching the news on television. I had taken a mental health day off to get away from work and relax. The court appearance of a CISU patient who had molested and murdered a 3 or 4 year old girl showed up on the news. The patient had been hospitalized as he was deemed unfit to proceed on the charges against him. He was examined and evaluated by several psychiatrists and psychologists and given an array of diagnoses, which back then would have most likely gotten him a not guilty by reason of insanity judgment. He would not have had to go to prison and would have been committed to the less restrictive setting of the state hospital with the possibility of a conditional release. Dr. Hewlin had interacted with this patient, who eventually asked to be taught the SIH process and reportedly was very persistent and consistent in its practice, like the ex-Marine officer he was. He by now had been deemed fit to proceed and had a court date to state his plea. Whereas most other patients and their attorneys had opted and would probably always opt for the NGRI plea, the patient did not. The day before he was to appear in court, he dismissed his attorney. The following afternoon, he stood in court facing the judge and regretfully and humbly proclaimed, "I am responsible and I am sorry." No one expected this. It took a few moments before the judge could grasp what had just happened.
So a total shift, right? Now just imagine how powerful this person has become. He's no longer operating on the left side of the grid, shifted his grid and taken responsibility for his actions. Just amazing.
I had played tennis with Dr. Hewlin and this fellow on 2 or 3 occasions, and though the patient was most polite and considerate, I had judgments. However, at that very moment, I only felt tenderness and love for him and sensed a huge shift in the entire courtroom as well. The judge and attorney's voices were now gentle, and all those around him seemed to be looking at him with tender smiles.
So as his energy shifted and he was becoming more present and equanimous within himself, he started affecting the entire environment.
The judge and attorney's voices were now gentle, and all those around him seemed to be looking at him with tender smiles. It was a moment. So when Dr. Hewlin asked if some of us would like to learn about this Ho'oponopono after tennis one afternoon, I jumped fast and high, anxiously waiting for the tennis game to come and go. It's now almost 20 years later, and I am still awed by what I have since learned was the divinity working through. Dr. Hewlin at Hawaii State Hospital. I am eternally grateful to Dr. Hewlin and the weird process he brought with him. By the way, in case you're wondering, the patient was found just plain guilty and was, in a sense, rewarded by the judge who granted his request to serve his sentence in a federal penitentiary in his home state, where he could be near his wife and children. Also, though almost 20 years have passed, I received a call this morning from the former secretary of the unit, wanting to know if Dr. Hewlin would be available anytime soon to get together with some of the old staff, most of whom have since retired. We will be meeting with them in a couple of weeks. Who knows what may unfold? I'll keep my antennae up for further stories. Peace, OH. And there it was. Dr. Hewlin had indeed accomplished a miracle at the hospital. By practicing love and forgiveness, he transformed people who were hopeless and in many ways considered throwaways of society. That's the power of love.
So once again, two forces, fear and love. What are we operating with? What is the state of consciousness that we are operating with? This is something that we, all of us, right, actually start to need, start to pay attention to.
I wanted to know even more, of course. As I was completing the first draft of this book, I sent it to Dr. Hewlin for review. I wanted him to check it for accuracy. I also wanted him to fill in any holes in the story about his years at that mental hospital. About 1 week after he received the manuscript, he wrote the following email to me. Ao Aqua, this is a confidential note to you and to you alone. It comes from my reading the draft of Zero Limits. I have other comments to make on the draft, but I will leave them for later emails. You're done, Morna said without being emphatic. I'm done with what? I replied. You're done with Hawaii State Hospital. Although I sensed the finality of her comment that summer day in July 1987, I said, I have to give them 2 weeks' notice. Of course, I didn't. It never came up to do so, and no one from the hospital made mention of it. I never returned to the hospital even when I was invited to attend my farewell party. My friends had it without me. The farewell gifts were delivered to the foundation of I office following the party. I loved my stay at Hawaii State Hospital in the forensic unit. I loved the folks on the ward. At some point, I don't know when, I passed from being staff psychologist to being a member of the family. I lived closely with staff, patients, rules, polices, cliques, and forces seen and unseen on the ward for 3 years, 20 hours a week.
So Morana, his guide, right, got to know, right? So she has the download, she has that sensitivity to feel that now your job is done, move on. So many times we do not understand this, right? We need to understand that when is it enough is enough, and we need to move on. The more connected we become, the more available the sensitivity is there for us. And this is one thing that I've seen, that when you start accessing the higher states or the higher focus levels, this sensitivity automatically starts to come to you. When to do something, till when to do it, and when to stop doing something is a very, very important thing that we need to understand and get into that state.
I was there when seclusion rooms, metal restraints, medication, and other forms of control were regular and acceptable modes of operation. I was there when the use of seclusion rooms and metal restraints simply evaporated at some point. When? Nobody knows. Physical and verbal violence evaporated too, almost completely. The drop in medication use occurred on its own.
So, so when you look at it from our perspective of the 4 S's, right? Effortlessly, that means swata, easy for you to do, right? It was for the highest good and it was accepted. So all the 4 S's were manifested in this thing. Totally effortlessly, it just happened. And when things just happen, you don't even know how it has happened, when it has happened. That's really beautiful. And I think if we look back in our lives, most of the stuff that has really made a difference in our lives has happened because of the 4 S's being in play.
At some point, who knows when, patients left the unit for recreation and work activities without restraints and without needing medical approval. The transformation of the ward from being crazy and tense to being peaceful simply occurred without conscious effort. The transformation of the ward from being chronically understaffed to being overstaffed simply took place. So, I want to make it clear that I was a close and active family member on the ward. I was not an onlooker.
So,
Yes,
So again, everything just happened, effortlessly happened. And there was a connection, right? So he became a family member. He was not an outsider. He integrated, everything started to integrate. Everyone started coming on the same page, and the shift started to take place.
Yes, I provided no therapy. I did no psychological testing. I attended no staff meetings. I did not participate in case conferences on patients. I did, however, become intimately involved in the workings of the ward. I was present when the first in-ward work project, baking cookies for sale, appeared. I was present when the first off-ward activity, car washing, appeared. I was present when the first off-ward recreation program started. I didn't carry out the usual functions of a staff psychologist, not because I felt that they were useless. I just didn't do them for whatever unknown reasons. I did, however, walk the ward and took part in the baking of cookies and in jogging and tennis games off ward. But more than anything, I did my cleansing before, during, and after each visit to the ward, week in and week out for 3 years. I cleaned with whatever was going on in me with the ward every morning and every evening. And if anything about the ward came up in my mind, thank you, I love you, peace of I, Hale Kala. I love this further clarification. While it revealed a humbleness on Dr. Hewlin's part, it also helped explain what he did and did not do while employed at the hospital.
So basically, what was he involved in? All the uplifting stuff, all the stuff that was operating from the right side of the grid. He was not involved in anything which was involved in the left side of the grid. So where was his attention? His attention was totally focused on uplifting stuff, stuff that was generative, not ungenerative, not depleting, uplifting. Everything that was uplifting, that is where he focused his attention.
I wrote him back and asked for his permission to include the email here to share it with you. He wrote back one word, the one I expected him to write. Yes. I'm not done with what I can learn from this amazing man. We decided we would begin to lead seminars together and, of course, be co authors of this book. But at least now I had the complete story on how he helped heal an entire ward of mentally ill criminals. He did it like he does everything, by working on himself. And the way he works on himself is with three simple words: I love you.
So it all boils down to I love you.
This is the same process you and I can do too, of course. If I had to sum up the modernized self-identity through Ho'oponopono method that Dr. Hewlin teaches in a few short steps, it might look like this. Continuously clean. Take action on ideas and opportunities that come your way. Continuously clean.
So this is very important. Okay. Keep clearing. And as you clear, whatever shows up in your reality, whatever shows up in your conscious awareness, start saying yes. Again, I repeat, we are stuck so much in I can't, I won't, I'm not capable. If it shows up, say yes. And let me tell you, 9 out of 10 times, 9 out of 99 out of 100 times, the universe will provide you the help, the support, the capability to achieve and do whatever has shown up in your life, provided you start saying yes. Okay. And then, of course, you need to keep clearing yourself. and not allow yourself to get into the left side of the grid. The more you clear, the more on the right side you'll be, the more you can get done.
That's it. It may be the shortest route to success ever created. It might be the path of least resistance. It might be the most direct route to the zero state. And it all begins and ends with one magical phrase, I love you. That's the way to enter the zone of zero limits. And yes, I love you.
So now if we start loving everyone, everything around us, don't you think it's automatically going to take us into the state of zero? Because you'll never be in a depleting state. You'll always be in an uplifting state of consciousness.
Epilogue, the three stages of awakening. My job here on earth is twofold. My job is first of all to make amends. My second job is to awaken people who might be asleep. Almost everyone is asleep. The only way I can awaken them is to work on myself.
So this is again something that Nagarji also keeps talking about, is that once you are awake, then you're not asleep. And the sleeper cannot know what the waker knows, but the waker knows what the sleeper knows, right? So the idea here is basically to waken people up. And the more people become awake, the better it is for everyone concerned. And how can we do that? By being ourselves in equanimity, by clearing ourselves. The more clean we are, the better it is for entire humanity. So we are constantly thinking of helping others, but the most important thing is to help yourself. How can you clear yourself? Because if something is happening and you are aware of it, that means you are involved in it and it is happening with you. So the more you clear yourself, whatever occurs to you will be clear. And the clearer you are, it clears everything else. So the only way I can awaken everyone is by clearing myself.
The other day, a reporter asked me, where do you see yourself a year from now? In the past, I would have given him a sincere accounting of what I hope to achieve. I talk about my plans, goals, and intentions. I tell him about books I wanted to write or things I wanted to be, do, create, or buy. But because of all the work I've done with Dr. Hewlett, I no longer state goals or intentions or make plans for the future. So I instead replied with the truth of this moment. Wherever I'll be will be far better than what I can imagine right now.
So basically, what has he done, right? He has shifted from operating from the small guy, which is ego driven, to the big guy, allowing, expecting whatever needs to happen will happen. So he has shifted and jacked into the flow. Rather than deciding what will happen, he allows things to happen. Rather than making an effort, he has gone into effortlessness. He just allows things to happen.
There's more depth to that answer than you might first notice. It came from inspiration. The answer surprised me as I said it. It also revealed where my mind is these days. I'm more interested in this moment than the next one. As I pay attention to this moment, all the future ones unfold quite nicely. As I once told Dr. Hewlett, my intention these days is to honor the intention of the divine.
So once again, it was a download. He was not thinking. So when we go into these states, right, there's a stillness which is there, and you say without thinking. Okay. So over here, he's very clearly, he's allowing it. So he's saying he did not even know where that statement came from. So what happened? A download came and he said it. A download came and he said it. So he won't even understand what he said, maybe after some time, because it is he is getting inspired to say something. It is not coming from his conscious mind. So there's a total shift in the way that he is operating in his conscious awareness. And of course, he is what he says, my intention these days is to honor the intention of divinity. So he is jacking in to the divine purpose rather than his individual and small consciousness purpose.
I relayed the reporter's question and my inspired answers to a friend just a few minutes ago. He loved it. He's been doing Ho'oponopono with me for a few months now. So he understood the ultimate truth. When you let go of your ego and the ego's desires, you allow something better to guide you, the divine.
So So beautifully put here. When you let go of your ego and your ego's desire, that means the small guy's desires, you allow something better, that's the big guy, to guide you.
This new me and new understanding is all part of my vivification. This didn't all happen overnight, of course, but by saying, I love you, and the other statements, I have been led to a deeper awareness, what some might call an awakening, maybe even enlightenment itself. I came to understand there are at least three stages to this awakening, and they are almost a map of life's spiritual journey. They are: one, you're a victim. We are virtually all born feeling we are powerless. Most of us stay that way. We think that the world is out to get us. The government, the neighbors, the society, the bad guys, in whatever form they may seem to take. We don't feel we have any influence. We are the effect of the rest of the world's cause. We gripe, complain, protest, and gather in groups to fight those in charge of us. Except for a party now and then, life in general sucks.
So constantly complaining, constantly on the left side of the grid, constantly in the poor me attitude, constantly in the power game, right? The power game that we talk about from the Celestine prophecy, constantly attempting to grab power and grab attention. So it's the victim attitude.
Two, you're in control. At some point, you see a life changing movie like The Secret, or you read a book such as The Attractor Factor or The Magic of Believing, and you wake up to your own power. You realize the power of setting intentions. You realize the power you have to visualize what you want, take action, and achieve it. You begin to experience some magic. You start to experience some cool results. Life in general begins to look pretty good.
So now you're set, you understand the process of goal making, of setting your intent, right? This is the next step. And you understand that you are powerful and you can make things happen.
Your awakening. Number three, at some point after stage two, you begin to realize your intentions are limitations. You begin to see that with all your newfound power, you're still not able to control everything. You begin to realize that when you surrender to a greater power, miracles tend to happen. You begin to let go and trust. You begin to practice moment by moment awareness of your connection with the divine. You learn to recognize inspiration when it comes to you and you act on it. You realize you have choice but not control of your life. You realize the greatest thing you can do is agree to each moment. In this stage, miracles happen and they constantly astonish you as they do. You live, in general, in a constant state of amazement, wonder, and gratitude.
So now what is happening? You're jacking into the flow. You're allowing things to happen. You start becoming more childlike and are in awe of everything that is happening to you. You start living in gratitude and in appreciation and trusting that there is a divinity which is actually running things and making things happen. And that divinity knows more than you. So instead of operating out of the small guy, you're allowing the big guy to work you rather than you making that divinity work for you. You allow divinity to work you or work through you, and then the magic really starts to happen.
I've entered the third stage, and maybe you have too by now. Since you've come along the ride with me, let me try to further explain my own awakening. It may help prepare you for what you will soon experience, or help you better understand what you are currently experiencing. I had a glimpse of the divine in the first seminar with Dr. Hewlett. It was during those first days with him that I stopped my mental chatter. I accepted all. There was a peace almost beyond understanding. Love was my mantra. It was the song always playing in my brain.
So, what is the background music going on? This is something that we really, it really hits you in the Resilience Advantage program, that there is a constant track running. And that is that track which actually runs us, makes us behave in the way that we behave, right? The point is that that track has to stop. That mental chatter has to stop. We have to take care of the monkey mind. In the excursion workshop, we have that tool called the ECB, right? You put everything that is not required into the ECB, and it helps you to take care of the mental chatter. So the first thing in this path that happens is that there is a stillness which comes. You are that unnecessary thought process which is depleting you, because every thought consumes energy. If you see a depressed person, that depressed person is constantly thinking, and every thought consumes energy. So you'll always find a depressed person does not have any energy. So the first step in this awakening is stilling the mind, which happens beautifully with the Monroe process.
But this glimpse didn't stop there. Whenever I was in the presence of Dr. Hewlett, I felt peace. I'm sure it was the tuning fork effect. His tone affected mine. It brought me into harmony with peace.
So his tone affected me, right? Every one of us has a frequency, everyone has a tone, and there's a resonance in that tone. So again, when you come into the area or into the zone, into the field of a person who's in equanimity, you will automatically start to resonate with it, right? Who is the biggest pendulum? Who is the biggest clock? Everyone will start to resonate with that.
During the second seminar, I began to have what some would call psychic flashes. I saw auras. I saw angels around people. I received images. I still remember seeing invisible cats around Narissa's neck. When I told her, she smiled. Whether the image was real or not, it sure altered her mood. She
So when you shift consciousness, right, you're increasing the spectrum of your awareness. So if I can observe so much, when I start going into these states, the spectrum starts to increase. So we actually start to see things, hear things, feel things that were not in our conscious awareness previously, or not within our capacity. So our capacity starts to go up when we are going into these altered states.
Dr. Hewlin often sees question marks floating above people's heads, which tell him which person to call on in an event. Whenever he sees invisible symbols or beings, he adds, I know it sounds crazy. Psychiatrists would lock someone up for saying things like that.
Right. So now this is something which is spoken about in Celestine prophecy also, that if you are in a group of people and the person whose chance it is to talk will light up. And this is something that I've experienced in physical workshops that we conduct. The person actually lights up and we'll just tell that person, okay, it's now your chance to speak. And it automatically works so beautifully because, and when everyone starts operating like that, you can actually understand there is a flow to the conversation which is going on, and one thing leads to the other. So in this case, what is happening? He's seeing a question mark on top of the guy. Instead of lighting up, there's a question mark. Mukul Bhabi, you want to say something?
Yeah, even I was reminded of those offline workshops when it was like the sharing time, and you always used to say, okay, it's on you now, a particular person, and that person had to share.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah, this is exactly that.
Yeah.
He's right, of course, but once an awakening takes place, there's no looking back. In my first Beyond Manifestation weekend, I read some of the people's energy fields. They were in awe. I can't say this is a gift so much as it is an opening. A previously unused part of my brain turned on and lit up. Now my eyes see if I let them. I told Dr. Hewlin, everything seems to talk to me. Everything seems alive. He smiled knowingly.
Okay, so we have one more page. We'll complete this chapter. So we'll take a few minutes more. But over here, it's very important, right? Now he can see. So he says that everything is alive and everything talks to me. And let me tell you from personal experience, this actually starts to happen when we are going into these states. So you can actually commune, you can actually communicate. You can ask the glass, okay, what are you looking for? Are you happy or not? And then you will find that things will start to talk to you. This actually happens.
By the time of my second Beyond Manifestation weekend, I had another Satori experience. Satori is a glimpse of enlightenment, a taste of the divine. It's as though a window slides open and for a moment you merge with the source of life. It's as difficult to explain as describing a flower from another planet. But by seeing that I could disappear and experience zero limits, transformed me. I have that experience as a touchstone. I can recall it and return to it. On one level, this is wonderful, as it's my ticket back to bliss. But on another level, this is just another memory, keeping me from experiencing this moment. All I can do is keep cleaning.
So again, this is a beautiful paragraph, right? This is literally describing what happens in the workshops where you can set a pick code. You can set a connection with that state of consciousness so that you can go into that state of consciousness whenever you want to or whenever you need to for doing various things. And over a period of time, you can understand that, okay, I can do this better in focus 10. I can do this better in focus 12. I can do this better in focus 15, etc. But ultimately, it's the same syndrome that Ramakrishna ji had to disconnect with Kali ji if you want to transcend. So at a certain point, we will need to transcend even this connection. And as Nagarji keeps saying in his talks, that we need to look at getting into a higher laksh. We need to get into a higher state of consciousness. When we do that, the lower will automatically drop. You do not need to drop it. It automatically drops. So when we start stepping up our state of consciousness, the things which keep us attached to a lower state automatically fall away. It is effortless. You don't need to make an effort for that. You need to allow, okay, we need to let go of our attachments. That is the game that we need to actually play.
Sometimes when I'm in a meeting, I'll relax and unfocus my eyes, and I'll be able to see the truth behind a situation. It's as though time stops or at least slows down. What I then perceive is the underlying tapestry of life. It's a little like peeling off the top level of a painting to find a masterpiece under it. Call it psychic vision, x ray vision, or divine sight. I'd say that Joe Vitale and even Ao Aqua disappears into the zero state, or my eyes perceive it. There are zero limits. There just is. At that place, there's no confusion. It's all clarity.
So I keep telling people who attend the Monroe programs that you're going to start using a statement, I told you so, right? Because of this very principle, where when in that altered state, you can actually see what is really happening. Okay. And because you are able to perceive at a higher state of consciousness, at a higher frequency or a vibration, people around you are not able to see and perceive that. So you are constantly one step ahead of people. And that's why sometimes it leads to people getting irritated with you. But 9 out of 10 times, let me tell you, they will all land up doing what you tell them to do or you told them in the beginning. So you really need to restrain or refrain from using this phrase, I told you so. Okay. So give your opinion and step back and watch the fun. This is what happens, when we are starting to get into these states.
I don't live in that state. I still come back to the so called reality. I still have challenges. When Larry King asked me if I had had a bad day, I said yes, I still do. Dr. Hewlin said we would always have problems, but Ho'oponopono is a problem solving technique. As long as I keep saying I love you to the divine and I keep cleaning, I return to the place of zero limits.
So So if we are in that place of zero limits, then the problem technically disappears. So the more we clear, the more in equanimity we are, the more on the right side of the grid we start operating, the better off we become. And let me tell you, the moment you start doing that, you will start noticing the benefits of the problem. Many times when I go to people's places and they keep complaining to me, I'm having a bad time, and many times, you have a cycle in business also. I constantly tell my clients the bad time is a very good time. The simple reason is that you start paying attention to stuff that you stop paying attention to. You start tightening the screws. You start tightening your belt. You start becoming more efficient. You start paying attention to the stuff that needs your attention and you've been ignoring, right? And then when you come out of the cycle, you come out leaner, meaner, and much more efficient than what you were previously. But if you get stuck in the syndrome and you start getting stuck in the left side of the grid, then you have had it, because then you'll go into a downward spiral. We need to start focusing on what can be done, what we can do. And the moment we do that, what can we appreciate? What can we be grateful for? And we come on the right side, the stuff will start spiraling upwards, and you'll find that you'll always come out better off than what you were when the bad time actually came into your life. The so-called bad time.
The signal from zero is, if we try to put words on it, love. So saying I love you non-stop helps us to tune in. Repeating it helps neutralize the memories, programs, beliefs, and limitations that are in the way of your own awakening. As I keep cleaning, I keep tuning in to pure inspiration. As I act on that inspiration, better miracles than I could have ever imagined take place. All I have to do is to keep at it.
So as we get into these states and we keep clearing, right, we are getting out of the rut that we are in, out of operating in memory, and we get into that stillness, which allows the inspiration in. And the more we say yes to the inspiration, the more inspired our lives tend to start to become. And this is something that all of us can experience. It is not limited to just some people, right? Every one of us has that authority, has that love, has that power to be able to go into these states of consciousness.
Some people think they understand the voice of inspiration by paying attention to the tone of the voices they hear in their heads. A friend once said, I know the difference between my ego's voice and inspiration's voice because the ego has an urgency to it and inspiration is gentler.
So this is again something that I keep telling people who attend the workshops, that you need to discern what is coming from this guy and what is coming from below the line. And it has a tasir, it has a feel to it, right? The more you start understanding that feel, the more you can start acting on and using that feel to do what comes out of inspiration, rather than your small guy, which is operating totally from ego. We need to be able to observe it and be consciously aware of it. And the more attention we pay to it, that small voice in the head, the better off we are ultimately going to be.
I think this is deceiving. A voice that sounds harsh and a voice that sounds gentle are still voices from the ego. Even right now, as you read these words, you are talking to yourself. You are questioning what you are reading. You've come to identify with that voice and to think it's you. It's not. Divinity and inspiration are behind those voices. As you keep practicing Ho'oponopono, you keep getting clearer about what is actually inspiration and what isn't.
So basically, the more aware you become about it, the more you can actually discern it. So it's also a practice, right? The more you practice that awareness, the easier it is going to become for you to actually discern what is coming from where.
As Dr. Hewlin keeps reminding us, this is not a fast food approach to healing. It takes time. I'd add that awakening can happen at any time, even while reading this book, or taking a walk, or petting a dog. The situation doesn't matter. Your internal state does. And it all begins and ends with one beautiful phrase: I love you.
So again, what are you focusing on? What are you paying attention to? The more, and it can happen like that, like that, like that. And we are so blessed today, let me tell you, that what used to take decades for our Rishi Munis to achieve, using technology, we can hit it so fast, so efficiently, and so effectively. It's not funny, right? All the stuff that he has been talking about in this chapter, all of us can achieve it, right? Those of you who attended the excursion, attended the Gateway Voyage, the Lifeline programs, or the Guideline program, I'm sure you will resonate with what is being said in these pages. Yes, Mukul Bhabi.
So, besides that, of course, this book has been absolutely amazing, and I'm sure everybody will agree with it. There's one line today.
Bhabi, I think the fan in your thing is on.
Is this better?
Yeah, it will be better now. Once it stops rotating. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm saying, besides that, the book has been fantastic, which I'm sure everybody will agree with it. There's one particular sentence which came up today here, which I noted and I'm going to read it out, which again, I think it's on behalf of everyone because I'm sure everyone will resonate with this. Is wherever I'll be will be far better than what I can even imagine now for the future. So thank you to you and Shrimangla for this fantastic journey with this book. Really, really very good.
We are grateful that everyone is there with us on the journey. Otherwise, it would not be taking place. So it's a win-win for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's actually a fact, with our limited state, with our limited consciousness, we really can't imagine what we are capable of and where we can be. We are constantly saying, I can't, I won't. We are constantly limiting ourselves. The moment we start allowing things to happen, allowing, that beauty to come into our lives, get into appreciation and gratitude, most of the time we are living out of lack unnecessarily. Okay, the moment we start shifting, we start giving, that attitude of giving has to come. The moment you start shifting that, you will see the beauty coming into your life. I mean, personally, I'm experiencing it. That's why I'm telling you all. Otherwise, I wouldn't be saying. And it's actually there, we have to create the shift in us. And that's the true path to happiness. Everyone is looking for happiness. And we are constantly thinking that material things are going to make us happy. It's not at all going to make you happy until you get into that state of equanimity and gentleness within yourself. That happiness that you're hunting for and looking out for the next experience of going for the next holiday or, buying the next watch or buying the next purse or buying the next dress or eating food in 5-star hotels, that's not going to give you the happiness that you are really desiring. It has to come from within. It has to come from a deeper state of your own consciousness.
It's just beautiful.
Okay. Right. Anyone, I'm going to stop.